Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping straight into some really fascinating territory. We're exploring key insights from The Good Life, that incredible book based on the Harvard study of adult development. I'm really eager to unpack what these chapters have to tell us.
Absolutely. Yeah, this study, tracking lives for literally decades, it offers such a rich sort of understanding of what truly makes us thrive. We're going to zero in on the science behind meaningful connections and, overall well-being without getting too bogged down in overly academic language.
Right. And for anyone just joining us, The Good Life, it basically distills the wisdom from the longest scientific study of happiness ever done. And it's not just dry data, is it? It's filled with these compelling stories and actionable advice.
And it's got praise from some big names in psychology and personal growth. You mentioned Jay Shetty, Angela Duckworth, Arthur C. Brooks, Laurie Santos, Daniel Gilbert.
Yeah, exactly. That gives you a real sense of the caliber of research we're talking about here.
Yeah, definitely. So our goal today, our mission, if you like, is to pull out the most valuable practical nuggets for you, the listener. We'll be looking at this idea of social fitness, how we keep our relationships in good shape. Really important.
Okay.
Then the vital role of our attention in nurturing those connections, and some effective ways to navigate the inevitable bumps in the road.
Those bumps.
Yeah. So consider this your sort of fast track to understanding some core elements of a fulfilling life, maybe with a few surprising insights along the way.
Okay, fantastic. Let's dive right into Chapter 4 then. Social fitness, keeping your relationships in good shape. It kicks off with this really striking quote from John Steinbeck. "A sad soul can kill you quicker, far quicker than a germ." Wow.
Yeah, that hits you immediately, doesn't it?
It does.
It just sets the stage perfectly for understanding that relationships aren't just abstract concepts. They have this very real, tangible impact on our physical health.
And they follow that straight away with a story of Vera Eddings. She's a second-generation participant in the study. She was reflecting on her father's life. He was this dedicated engineer, but struggled to express his emotions.
Right. He had acquaintances, played sports, seemed successful on the surface.
Yeah, but his marriage ended, and he died feeling quite alone at 80. Vera's sadness about that, it really highlights the long-term consequences if we neglect those emotional bonds.
It's such a powerful reflection.
Mhm.
And it points to a challenge that might have been maybe particularly relevant for her father's generation, though maybe it persists today too.
Good point.
Where emotional expression wasn't always encouraged. Outward success doesn't always mean inner fulfillment or deep connection.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Then the chapter gets into this really fascinating and honestly quite surprising study. The one by Janice Kiecolt-Glaser.
Ah, yes, the punch biopsy study.
Exactly. With the caregivers of dementia patients. Can you sort of break down what they found and why it's so significant?
Sure. So Kiecolt-Glaser was looking into that powerful link between psychological stress and the body's actual ability to heal itself. She compared a group of caregivers, people under immense emotional strain from watching loved ones decline, with a control group of non-caregivers.
Okay.
Both groups got a tiny, standardized skin wound, a punch biopsy.
And the difference in the healing time was pretty remarkable, wasn't it?
It was stark. Yeah. The non-caregivers' wounds, they healed in about 40 days on average. But the caregivers, their wounds took a full 9 days longer to heal.
9 days.
9 days. That's a huge, statistically significant difference. It directly links that chronic stress from strained relationships to, slower physical healing.
Wow.
It just underscores how deeply connected our social, emotional, and physical selves really are.
Which leads perfectly into this core concept of social fitness. I love this analogy that they draw with physical fitness. We all get that our bodies need regular effort exercise, good food to stay healthy. If you stop moving, muscles weaken. And they argue the same thing applies to our relationships.
Precisely. We can't just assume that once we have friends or family or partners, that those bonds will just stay strong automatically. They need ongoing conscious effort, attention, care, just like maintaining physical health.
Yeah.
It's like a social ecosystem that needs tending.
And I think everyone can relate to those immediate physical feelings tied to relationships, right?
Oh, absolutely.
That buzz after a great chat, or the knot in your stomach after a fight, or lying awake when things are tense with someone you love.
Yeah, those aren't just fleeting emotions. They have real physical effects. We
Right.
kind of know it intuitively, but the book gives it that scientific grounding.
But they make a really crucial point, too. Figuring out our social fitness isn't as simple as, say, stepping on a scale.
Hmm.
It takes a much deeper, more honest kind of self-reflection, stepping back from the daily rush and really looking at our connections. Where are we putting our energy? Are we actually nurturing the relationships that support us?
And that can be surprisingly tough, can it? It can feel uncomfortable to face maybe where we've let things slide, or to admit that some relationships aren't as positive as we wish they were. But that honesty with ourselves is the vital first step.
Which is why they introduced this idea of doing a kind of mini Harvard study on ourselves,
Yeah.
using these self-reflection questions based on the actual study.
Right, like giving us the tools for our own personal social fitness checkup.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is that even the long-term Harvard participants, people who are deeply invested in understanding their own lives, didn't always love these questionnaires. Some skipped questions, left bits blank, even wrote like critical comments on them.
Ah, really?
Yeah. So it kind of normalizes that discomfort we might feel when we start really looking closely at these intimate parts of our lives.
Yeah.
It's not always easy to hold up that mirror.
No, definitely not. And to really drive home what happens when social fitness gets neglected, they share this really poignant case study of Sterling Ainsley, our man in Montana. Here's this material. Scientist, retired, seemingly had a bright future planned out.
Sterling's story is so revealing because it shows that gap between how things look on the outside and the inner reality. He presented this very optimistic view of his life, talked about his hobbies, his plans, focused on positivity and past successes when asked about resilience.
But when they dug a bit deeper into his actual daily life, a much more isolated picture comes out. He's living in a trailer. His main exercise is mowing his little lawn and gardening. He's technically married, but his wife lives 90 miles away, hardly any contact.
And his relationships with his grown kids, who he said were the most important thing to him. They existed mostly in his mind. He rarely saw them.
Yeah.
Gave reasons like not wanting to intrude or just calling instead of visiting.
And then there's that incredibly telling detail. George Vail, the interviewer, noticed the thick layer of dust on Sterling's passenger seatbelt.
Oof. Yeah.
It's such a small thing, but it speaks volumes about the lack of companionship in his day-to-day life, despite him saying things were fine.
It's a powerful, understated image, isn't it? Really highlights the absence of connection, contrasting so sharply with his positive self-assessment. He also drifted from old friends, many had died, and he admitted he was reluctant to form new, close bonds because he feared the pain of losing them again.
And the closest connection he seemed to have was this elderly neighbor, an 87-year-old woman in the trailer park he watched TV with every night.
Mm.
He even said he didn't know what he'd do if she passed away. It paints this clear picture of someone who, despite the optimism, was deeply, profoundly lonely.
Which leads perfectly into the next section. Loneliness hurts.
Yeah.
And the book is crystal clear. This isn't just metaphorical pain. They meticulously lay out the very real physical consequences of loneliness. It's not just a feeling, it really impacts our bodies.
We're talking things like increased sensitivity to physical pain,
Right.
a suppressed immune system, decline in brain function, even sleep isn't as restorative.
It's a whole cascade of negative physical effects, all stemming from that lack of social connection.
And the statistics they present really hammer home how widespread this is. That global online study, 1 in 3 people feeling lonely often.
Yeah, and young adults, 16 to 24, reporting the highest rates, like 40%. Plus the huge economic cost in the UK from lost productivity, employee turnover.
And the situation in Japan and the US even before 2020 was concerning. Lots of adults reporting loneliness.
Mm-hmm. Then you add the forced isolation of the pandemic, and that estimate of 162,000 deaths in 2020 potentially linked to social isolation. It just shows the gravity of the issue.
It really does.
And they make a crucial distinction here. Loneliness is subjective, deeply subjective.
You can be surrounded by people but still feel lonely.
Exactly. Or live alone by choice and feel very connected. It's about the gap, the difference between the social connection we want and what we actually have.
And they get into the evolutionary roots of it, which I found fascinating. Loneliness as a basic survival mechanism.
Yeah, back in early human history, being isolated from your group was incredibly dangerous. So our bodies developed this kind of internal alarm system.
Makes sense.
That stress response, being hyper alert to threats, disrupted sleep, it would have been a temporary adaptation for survival. But chronic loneliness, that's like the fire alarm just blaring constantly. Huge sustained strain on our mental and physical health.
So they wrap up this section saying loneliness is really just the tip of this huge iceberg of research showing the links between health and social connection, going way back.
And our basic relationship needs are actually pretty simple. Love, connection, belonging.
The big question then is, how do we actually meet those needs effectively today?
Which leads into a really thought-provoking exercise in the next section, life by the numbers. They ask you, the listener, to think about someone you really cherish, but maybe don't see as often as you'd like.
This one really made me stop and think. I instantly pictured a good friend who lives interstate, and then they walk you through this quite sobering calculation, estimating the time you might actually have left to spend with that person based on how often you see them now.
Yeah, they use their own relationship, Bob and Mark's as an example. Even though they talk weekly, they only see each other in person maybe 2 days a year. So if they both live to 100, that adds up to only about 58 days left together in person.
Wow, 58 days. That's stark.
It's a really stark way to frame how limited our time actually is.
And they give other relatable examples, like seeing someone weekly for coffee from age 40 to 80 only adds up to about 87 days total. It forces you to face how little time we might spend even with important people.
And then they put that next to the average time we spent with media in 2018, 11 hours a day.
11 hours.
Which adds up to something like 18 years of our waking life between 40 and 80. The difference in how we allocate time is just eye-opening.
They're quick to say the point isn't to make us panic or feel guilty, though.
No, not at all.
It's more about bringing this clear-eyed awareness to how we actually spend our finite time with the people we love, making us more conscious of those moments.
Right. And they highlight the potential for untapped resources in relationships we already have, but maybe neglect a bit, suggesting that even small, intentional adjustments to prioritize connection can have a really significant positive impact on our well-being.
Which flows naturally into the section on 2 crucial predictors of happiness. They talk about that 2008 study calling spouses of participants in their 80s every night for 8 nights, just asking about their day.
And the findings were pretty clear-cut. The amount of time these older adults spent interacting with others, especially their spouses, was directly linked to their daily happiness. More social engagement on a given day meant they reported feeling happier. Simple as that.
And what I found really interesting was how good relationships acted as a buffer, almost.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
On days when people had more physical pain, if they were in satisfying relationships, their overall happiness didn't drop as much as those in less satisfying ones.
Exactly. It's like those strong connections provided a kind of emotional resilience. It all boils down to this elegantly simple but profoundly important message: the frequency of our contact with people and the quality of those interactions. Those are 2 major predictors of our happiness.
So after thinking about all this, how do we actually start assessing our own social fitness? They introduce this idea of your social observatory. They circle back to Sterling Ainsley, who, despite being so isolated, genuinely thought he was doing okay socially. His perception was totally off.
Right. And the first step they suggest is surprisingly simple. Just make a list. List the 10 people currently closest to you in your life. Just asking, who do I interact with regularly? Who feels significant? Can be really revealing. Who comes to mind, who doesn't?
And they say to include not just the obvious ones, family, close friends, but also people who influence your daily life, like a boss or coworker.
Yeah, even those seemingly smaller connections, like someone you chat with at the gym or in a hobby group, it broadens your view of your whole social web.
Your social universe.
Exactly. And then they introduce the social universe chart. It's a visual tool to map these relationships. It's got 2 axes: how energizing or depleting you find interacting with that person, and how frequently you actually interact with them.
So energizing means you feel more alive, connected, positive after seeing them. And depleting means you feel drained, tense, maybe anxious.
And it's crucial to remember these are personal assessments. What's energizing for one person might be draining for another. It's your individual emotional response.
So you place each person from your list on this chart. And they suggest using that person you thought of earlier, the cherished but rarely seen one, as a starting point.
Right. It helps you visually represent your current social landscape.
And as you place each person, you're meant to reflect on why they're in that spot. Does it match how you want the relationship to be? If someone's consistently depleting, why might that be?
And I really like the next step, drawing arrows on the chart to show where you'd like relationships to shift.
Yeah, me too.
Maybe you want to see an energizing friend more often, or maybe there's a depleting relationship you want to try and improve.
And they're clear that labeling something depleting doesn't automatically mean cutting that person off, right?
Well, not at all. It's more like a signal. It flags something important. It needs attention, maybe an opportunity for growth, better communication, or maybe setting some healthier boundaries.
They then go much deeper into Sterling Ainsley's backstory in Rosalie, Harriet, and Sterling. This really gives crucial context for his later isolation. His early life was incredibly tough.
Yeah, really challenging beginnings. Born into his older sister Rosalie's care during a difficult birth, father's gambling problems, mother institutionalized, family breaking apart. Rosalie was vital in those early years.
And then this incredibly kind family friend, Harriet Ainsley, who'd just lost her own son, stepped in and basically raised Sterling.
Remarkable women. Both Rosalie and Harriet showed such compassion and support, despite their own hardships as working-class women back then.
And Sterling himself acknowledged how much they influenced him. He credited Harriet with nurturing his ambitions, his interest in literature.
And Rosalie remembered Sterling having a positive impact on others too, feeling intellectually stimulated by him.
Which makes it all the more poignant, really, that despite these deep, formative bonds with such supportive figures, Sterling eventually lost touch with both of them later in life.
It really underscores how easily even significant relationships can just fade away without that intentional effort, that upkeep.
Which brings us to this fundamental idea in The Keystones of Relationships. The book stresses that we're inherently social creatures. We need others for different kinds of support.
And that reciprocal exchange, the giving and receiving, that's foundational to a meaningful life.
They outline 7 key types of support identified by the Harvard study. Safety and security, who you call in a crisis.
Learning and growth, who encourages you to try new things.
Emotional closeness and confiding, who knows your deepest stuff.
Identity affirmation and shared experience. People who share your history, like siblings or childhood friends, they say these are irreplaceable.
Right.
Romantic intimacy. Help, both practical and informational. And finally, fun and relaxation.
And to help assess this, they give us the sources of support in My Life table. It's like an X-ray of your social world.
Yeah, you list your key relationships and put a plus or minus for each type of support that relationship provides.
It's such a great exercise because it makes you think about which kinds of support matter most to you personally. And are you actually getting enough of that from your network?
Exactly. You might find you have lots of fun connections, but lack someone to confide in, or the other way around.
And those gaps you see on the chart can often connect to those feelings of dissatisfaction or unmet needs.
Definitely. But you might also uncover surprising sources of support you hadn't fully appreciated, maybe taken for granted.
So moving beyond reflection, the book acknowledges that seeing where you want to make changes is one thing, but actually doing it can be hard.
The action part.
They connect this to research on motivation, realizing that gap between where you are now and where you want to be is actually a powerful driver for change.
Right. So they suggest, going back to that social universe chart, look at the energizing and maybe slightly depleting relationships. Think about small nudges you could make, small things to shift those slightly depleting ones towards being more energizing.
And for the really depleting ones,
They advise more deliberate thought, maybe reaching out to address underlying issues, those sort of emotional elephants in the room.
then the chapter gives 3 specific, really actionable suggestions for improving social fitness. First is the power of generosity.
Yeah, this one challenges that classic Western idea of the totally self-made person.
Right.
It emphasizes how our identity is shaped by our connections, our place in the social world. Like a spoke needing a wheel, they say.
I like that, and they quote the Dalai Lama on being wisely selfish.
The idea that caring for others ultimately benefits ourselves too. Research backs this up. Generosity and happiness feed each other in an upward spiral.
And they introduce another table, people I support. It mirrors the earlier one, but makes you think about the support you give to others, using those same 7 categories.
It encourages looking at the balance of giving and receiving in your life. Especially important if you're maybe a caregiver or under a lot of stress yourself.
Okay, the second suggestion is learning new dance steps. This is about how we get good at what we practice, right?
Exactly. And we can unknowingly become really skilled at unhelpful relationship patterns. They use Sterling Ainsley, again, his avoidance of closeness, rooted in his past losses.
And while the fear of getting hurt in relationships is totally valid,
Absolutely.
they point out that always avoiding risk means you miss out on all the benefits of connection too. Which leads to the big question. How do we overcome past hurts and open ourselves up to new, better relationship experiences?
A huge question. And the third suggestion is radical curiosity. They use that great Emerson quote, "Every man I meet is my master in some point, and in that I learn of him."
Yeah, it's about shifting focus outwards towards others instead of being too stuck in our own heads.
Right. Becoming too self-absorbed can make us overlook the rich experiences of people around us. They talk about the joy and aliveness you often see in people who are genuinely curious about others.
They share that lovely story about Bob's father and his radical curiosity engaging with strangers, like the taxi driver, how that outward focus actually energized him.
It's a great anecdote. They encourage us to be more intentional, more radical in cultivating interest in others, asking, who is this person really? What's their deal? And then following up with questions, active listening.
And like generosity, curiosity creates its own upward spiral, fostering deeper connection.
Which naturally leads to understanding. They draw on their therapy experience, talking about the gratitude they feel for clients, the joy of feeling truly in sync with someone else's experience.
And the crucial next step isn't just understanding, it's communicating that understanding back to the person.
Yes. When we feel truly seen and understood, it creates such a powerful connection. It bridges that gap between me and the world. Being seen is an amazing thing, as the book puts it.
They wrap up chapter 4 by stressing how important regular check-ins on our relationships are, just like physical fitness maintenance.
Maybe making it a routine, New Year's, birthdays, whatever works.
And they remind us that the Harvard study participants in their 70s and 80s consistently valued relationships most.
Circling back to Sterling Ainsley one last time, that contrast between his deep love for his mother, sister, kids, and his actual lack of contact. The quiet pain of distance, even when you care deeply.
So the final message of the chapter is clear. Investing time and energy in relationships is absolutely vital for our health and happiness now and in the future.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, let's move into chapter 5. Attention to relationships, your best investment, starts with another Emerson quote. The only gift is a portion of thyself, linking attention to being a valuable gift.
Right. And they include some thought-provoking questions in the second-generation questionnaire, asking about running on automatic, rushing through things, paying attention to physical sensations. Really gets you thinking about your own mindfulness.
Then there's that great thought experiment. Imagine having a limited amount of life money that depletes with everything you do, even just existing. Would you live differently? It connects to the reality that our time is limited and uncertain.
It links beautifully to that Buddhist mantra they share. If only death is certain and the time of death is uncertain, then what should I do? It really underscores the urgency of how we spend our time.
And they share those moving reflections from the 80s couple survey, Edith and Neil regretting worrying about trivial things, wishing they'd spent more time with loved ones.
It's such a common theme in the study, isn't it? That feeling of not giving enough thought to where attention went and regretting not spending more time on important relationships.
They analyze the language we use, spend time, pay attention, arguing these financial metaphors just don't capture how precious time and attention really are.
Exactly. They argue time and attention are essentially what our life is.
And those powerful quotes Simone Weil, attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity.
And John Tarrant. Attention is the most basic form of love. It highlights that reciprocal nature, giving attention, enriches both people, makes us feel more alive.
So time and attention are the essential materials of happiness, the reservoir our lives flow from. They really urge us to examine where our attention has actually been going.
They then break down attention into two key meanings. The first is about priority, and time spent linking back to that frequency dimension on the social universe chart.
Are we actually making time for what matters?
And they acknowledge that feeling of time scarcity so many of us have. Work, family, endless demands.
Yeah, the time famine.
But they point out the paradox. We feel time poor now, but often operate under this illusion of a future time surplus, always putting off important relational things until later.
Guilty as charged sometimes.
We all are. And interestingly, data shows average work hours have actually declined globally since the mid-20th century. Americans work 10% less than in 1950, for example.
So it's not just about the amount of time.
Seems not entirely. Which leads to the second meaning of attention. How we actually spend the time we have and what our mind is doing moment to moment.
The quality of attention.
Exactly. They share their own relatable experience scheduling calls to stay connected. But even then, finding attention wanders.
Happens to the best of us.
It does. Mind wandering during connection happens easily. Comfort, familiarity, or just the pull of distractions like the internet.
They even recount Mark catching Briggs spacing out during a chat about attention.
Perfect example. It shows how easily our minds drift, even when we intend to be present.
And they bring in that big 2010 study by Killingsworth and Gilbert using smartphones to track thoughts and activities.
Yeah, the key finding was mind-blowing. Nearly half our waking moments are spent thinking about something other than what we're currently doing.
Half. That's incredible.
It is. And while mind wandering is an evolutionary adaptation for planning, they argue it can become excessive in our modern environment and actually lead to unhappiness.
They quote the study. The ability to think about what is not happening is a cognitive achievement that comes at an emotional cost.
That really sums it up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This powerful cognitive tool can also make us feel detached.
They then use that really vivid analogy, the owl and the hummingbird.
Right. Suggesting distraction is maybe better understood as overstimulation, the constant competition for our attention. Neuroscience shows our conscious mind can really only do one thing at a time. Multitasking is just rapid, costly switching.
The owl represents that focused, maybe more nourishing state of attention.
While the hummingbird, flitting between things, represents the challenge of our screen-heavy world. And they ask, which one ends up busier but less truly nourished?
It's a great visual. To make it more concrete, they bring back Leo DeMarco, the happy high school teacher from Chapter 2.
Yeah, his life is a case study in managing time and attention in relationships. Despite being a super involved teacher, he made conscious efforts with his family.
Like those deliberate one-on-one summer fishing trips with each kid.
Exactly. Not just being there, but giving focused attention, teaching skills, listening. And he showed similar attentiveness to his wife, grace shared activities, recommending books, real interest.
They then tackle our attention online, acknowledging how much tech, smartphones, social media shapes intimate parts of our lives now, often putting a device right between us and others.
It's a vulnerable situation, isn't it? Our emotions, our lives flowing through these platforms.
And they raise those big, timely questions. How are these new ways of communicating affecting our relationships? Deepening connection or inhibiting it?
And they admit, finding definitive answers is hard. Research is ongoing.
They look at the give and take of social media, acknowledging the positives first.
Right? Enhancing connection with existing friends, reconnecting with old ones, forming new communities around shared interests or challenges like rare diseases or support for marginalized groups.
But then they discuss isolation and connection, especially through the lens of the pandemic, that massive global experiment.
Online tools definitely filled a void: remote work, virtual school, online everything.
But it wasn't enough, was it? It lacked that full sensory experience, the emotional depth of being in person.
Absolutely not. The pandemic starkly showed the limits. Physical presence just can't be duplicated by a machine.
Right.
We saw that rise in diseases of despair, depression, anxiety, loneliness, even among people who were well connected online. And that phenomenon of skin hunger.
Yeah, that really struck me, the craving for physical touch.
It hammered home our fundamental human needs.
So the message isn't ditch technology, but don't scroll, engage. They offer practical tips.
Like engaging, actively contacting people, commenting, not just passively scrolling. Studies on Facebook use show active users generally feel better.
And take your temperature. Notice how you feel after using social media, energized or depleted.
Crucial self-awareness. Also, check in with important people. Ask partners, kids, how they feel about your phone use. Do they miss your full attention?
Ooh, that's a brave question to ask.
It is. And finally, take tech holidays, periodic breaks, to see technology's effects more clearly.
They end that section saying, the war for our attention is fought in our minds and can be won there, which is empowering.
It is. And it leads right into being and staying alert, introducing mindfulness as the practice of alertness and attention.
Using Kabat-Zinn's definition, awareness that emerges through paying attention on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally.
It's about consciously paying attention to your body, your surroundings, without judging, bringing thinking and experience into sync with now, which increases our ability to act thoughtfully.
And it doesn't have to be intense meditation, right? It can be just stopping, paying attention, noticing, asking, what's here that I haven't noticed before?
Exactly. And they clarify a common misunderstanding. Mindfulness isn't about having a full mind, the right thoughts. Often it's about becoming aware of that constant stream of thoughts and worries, pulling us away from the present.
It boils down to Ram Dass's simple message. Be here now.
Couldn't be simpler or harder sometimes.
True. They then apply that "what am I not noticing" question to people, encouraging us to aim for effort in understanding others.
Shifting from trying to be right about someone's experience to just being genuinely curious about it. They mentioned their 2012 study on couples having difficult conversations.
The one tracking empathy.
Yes. Partners recorded summaries of frustrating events, then discussed them.
And the key finding.
Was that while getting the feeling right, empathic accuracy was good, what mattered more, especially for women, was feeling their partner was making a genuine effort to understand, even if they didn't nail it.
So just trying sincerely goes a long way.
A remarkably long way. It builds connection. They give us questions to ask ourselves to cultivate that effort. How is this person feeling? What are they thinking? Am I missing something? How might I feel in their shoes?
And crucially, letting the other person know you're curious and trying to understand.
Yes, communicating that intention makes a huge difference.
They revisit Leo DeMarco again. Leo gets a B+ for effort, noting he wasn't necessarily the one who spent the most time with family, but he consciously tried to improve and made the time count with focused attention.
Right. Not grand gestures, just consistent presence, listening, asking questions, offering help.
They share that funny bit where he's surprised when asked what his wife Grace might have liked about him when they first met. He was so focused on others.
Classic Leo. And they include his daughter Rachel's reflection from her 30s, how even in their close family, she had to actively carve out time as an adult to connect deeply, especially with her dad. Initiate those deeper talks.
It shows even in good families, it takes ongoing effort and planning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Leo's earlier efforts sowed seeds that nourished those relationships later on. Focused attention leads to reciprocal love, consideration, belonging, positive feelings, better health. The whole package, really, like we saw with the DeMarcos.
So they wrap up chapter 5, moving from time spent to the quality of attention we give in a little more attention every day.
A harder question to answer sometimes because so much is automatic.
They suggest simple ways to start. Pick 1 or 2 enriching relationships and consciously give extra attention there. Maybe use your social universe chart.
Or make small routine changes for distraction-free time. No phones at dinner, scheduled coffee or walks.
And keep practicing curiosity, even with people you know well. Go beyond, how was your day? Ask playful questions, dig deeper.
Because sincere interest motivates people to respond.
Oh.
Engaging conversations often come from perspective taking. Curiosity is contagious.
Okay, brilliant. Let's move to chapter 6. Facing the music. Adapting to challenges in your relationships. Opens with that amazing Leonard Cohen quote, "There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in."
Sets the perfect tone, embracing challenges, finding light in the cracks.
And they include that Harvard questionnaire prompt. What is your philosophy for getting over the rough spots? Acknowledging challenges are just part of it.
They introduced Peggy Keene's story. Seemed on a good path at 26, but her world shifted hugely when she acknowledged she was gay, feeling lonely, lacking resources.
And they bring in George Vaillant's insight about the 2 pillars of happiness, love, and coping mechanisms that don't push love away.
Crucial, because while relationships are key to the good life, they're also often involved in the lowest moments, divorce, loss, addiction.
That irony again, the people closest can hurt us most, even unintentionally.
Exactly. So the central question becomes, when challenges hit, do we face them or avoid them?
They fast forward to Peggy at 50, successful career, happy long-term relationship.
Right. And her 2016 questionnaire showed work stress, yes, but she felt confident handling personal problems, didn't feel overwhelmed. And she attributed that resilience to her supportive friends and family, felt cared for, helped by them.
So her story shows how engaging with close relationships helps navigate big challenges.
Definitely. And they use that John Kabat-Zinn quote, "You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf," framing the chapter around adapting, learning to ride those waves.
Facing challenges moment by moment, interaction by interaction.
Yes. They then contrast coping styles with Abigail and Lucia, both finding breast lumps in their late 40s.
Abigail was avoidant, minimized it, told no one, saw it as a burden.
While Lucia was proactive, told her husband immediately, saw a doctor, told her daughter, accepted support while trying to carry on.
Defining coping styles as those habitual ways we respond to stress and how relationships play into that.
Contrasting Abigail's facing away with Lucia's leaning in, direct action flexibility.
And the outcomes were stark. Abigail's untreated cancer was fatal. Lucia survived due to early detection. A powerful illustration.
And they state clearly, avoidance is common initially, but when we avoid relationship challenges, the problem usually gets worse.
The Harvard data backs that up too, avoiding difficulties in midlife linked to poorer memory and lower life satisfaction 30 years later.
Long-term consequences. Effective coping needs a range of tools, adapting to situations and relationships.
They use Sterling Ainsley, again, his rigid reaction to the hippie movement alienating his kids.
Like an earthquake-resistant building needing flexibility, We need adaptability in life.
But changing ingrained coping styles is hard, even for smart people. They contrast that with people like Peggy Keene and her parents who grew through facing trials with support.
Which leads to the idea that while reactions feel automatic, our thinking hugely influences our emotions. Citing the Bible, Epictetus, the Buddha.
All saying our perceptions shape our emotional state.
So they introduce slowing down emotional sequences to see the hidden processing. Stress to reaction happens in stages, each offering choices.
And they mention these models are used successfully in lots of areas: aggression, depression, sports.
Right, and they introduce the WISER model as a tool to slow down reactions, examine emotions more closely, especially in tricky relationship moments.
WISER, watch, interpret, select, engage, reflect. A way to downshift automatic responses. They use Clara getting unwelcome parenting advice from her sister Frances at a barbecue as the example.
Stage 1, watch. That psychiatric adage, don't just do something, sit there. Initial impressions are rarely complete. Purposeful curiosity helps when emotion flares.
Observing broadens the view, prevents harmful reflexes. For Clara, difficult due to their history, feeling insulted instead of snapping or stewing. Watch.
Watch the whole situation. Environment, the other person, yourself. What's typical? What might be overlooked?
Maybe consider Frances's experience at family things or stressors in her life. Not excusing, but context.
Exactly. And watching includes observing your own reactions, body sensations, impulses.
Stage 2, interpret. Understanding requires knowing what's at stake for me. Emotion signals something important. Asking why am I getting emotional clarifies it.
It's like filling in the blank, because observation is incomplete, leading to assumptions.
So Clara asks why the comment made her mad about her sister, Angela, her own mothering. And about Frances, what were her intentions, motivations?
And watch out for magnifying negatives, mountains out of molehills, or minimizing big problems like Abigail did.
Expand understanding beyond the initial take. Consider multiple perspectives. What might I be overlooking?
And pay attention to your internal signals, fear, anger, stomach sinking. They cue deeper curiosity. Why am I feeling this? What's really at stake?
Stage 3, select. Clarifying goals, what do I want to accomplish, and resources, strengths, weaknesses, options.
For Clara, goals might be keep a good relationship with sister, protect daughter, feel good about her parenting.
She thinks through options. Do nothing, joke, talk privately, weighs outcomes. Decides on a private talk, realizing Frances might listen, but she doesn't want advice.
Selecting a strategy is personal values, culture, intuition from experience. And one response is rarely the end. Might need to revisit.
The key is slowing down where possible, moving from automatic to considered, purposeful responses.
Stage 4, engage. Implementing the chosen strategy skillfully. Careful observation, interpretation, selection increase chances of success. But even logical plans can fail in execution. Practice helps.
Clara tries talking to Frances calmly in the kitchen. Starts okay. Frances apologizes briefly. But Clara's comment about Angela being different hits a nerve for Frances. Argument flares again, interrupted by Mom.
Mom's unexpected comment, Rue's shared laughter, then tension returns. They leave with unresolved feelings. Shows it's messy.
Stage 5, reflect. Monday morning quarterbacking. How did that go? Better or worse? Learned anything?
Learning from experience leads to wisdom. Reflect on recent events or lingering past ones.
They list reflection questions. Faced it or avoided. Assessed accurately. Talked to others. Consulted others.
The WISER model and reflection questions are like a coaching tool for that maybe 10% of life when we feel stuck or act unhelpfully.
Reflecting on what happened and why helps us see missed things, understand emotional cascades. Just living it isn't enough. Reflection improves future responses.
Reflection helps us pause in challenges, clarify goals, consider options, move in the right direction.
Okay, so WISER is for discrete challenges. But what about chronic patterns? Feeling stuck. That's the next bit. Getting unstuck.
Right. They quote Shahaku Okumura. The world we live in is the world we create, both physically and our mental stories.
People get stuck in similar places in different relationships, always fighting the last battle, anticipating past negatives repeating.
Stuckness often comes from patterns, some once helpful, now not. Reflecting past preoccupations that feel familiar, even if negative, those familiar dance steps.
Most people feel stuck sometimes. The question is, how much does it impact quality of life?
Bob shares his own story dating incompatible women, therapy helping him see the pattern.
Highlights the value of honest perspectives from trusted people to get unstuck.
Or self-distance reflection. If someone else told me this story, what would I think? What would I tell them?
And Shunri Suzuki's beginner's mind, staying open to learning about ourselves, not assuming we're experts on our own lives.
Finally, relationships, adaptation, and the end of the world. Using the pandemic as a massive global shock.
Surge in isolation, anxiety. Looking back at Harvard study members in the Depression, WWII, they relied heavily on relationships for survival and sanity.
Sharing experiences with loved ones after crises is crucial.
The pandemic impacted daily life lockdowns, separation requiring flexibility, mutual understanding in households.
In future global crises are inevitable. The lesson from the study: lean on relationships for support.
Concrete examples during COVID: staying in touch, reaching out, being patient, asking for help.
Mark shares that incredibly powerful personal story, his father's family escaping Nazi Germany, his grandmother's deep connections leading a German family to hide them during Kristallnacht, saving their lives.
At huge risk to themselves. Without them, Mark wouldn't exist.
A profound testament to the life-saving power of connection.
So they conclude Chapter 6, bringing it back to daily life. How do we respond to personal and global challenges? When hurt, or when we hurt others?
Acknowledging humans are mysterious, wonderful, dangerous, capable of beauty and destruction.
Zooming in to the individual struggle. Understanding and connecting, loving and being loved, avoiding pushing love away.
Making the effort to connect brings joy, novelty, safety, can even be life-saving.
Slowing down, seeking clarity, cultivating positive relationships helps us manage life's waves.
Our initial automatic responses are the only options. Recognizing this lets us pause during challenges, chart a path forward.
Wow. And that brings us to the close of this incredibly insightful deep dive into chapters 4, 5, and 6 of The Good Life. Just a wealth of valuable stuff to think about.
Indeed. We've covered, social fitness, the huge impact of attention, and practical ways to handle challenges with WISCR.
The big message that really resonates is just how true it is. Investing in relationships isn't just nice, it's the most fundamental investment for a fulfilling, healthy life.
Absolutely. So for you, our listener, maybe a final thought to mull over. How will you intentionally nurture one key relationship this week using some of these ideas we've talked about?
Great question. Thank you so much for joining us for this exploration. We look forward to diving into more fascinating topics with you next time on the